A number every American ought to be able to recite by heart in the current time is the number $22 trillion. The greatest crisis, I think, inarguably facing the United States today, the problem of every American that was not necessarily their responsibility or their fault, but is their problem, is the US national debt. The US national debt has continued to soar to the number $22 trillion. That is the amount that the US owes, that it has not paid back, money that has already been spent beyond the money that has been raised in taxes or by other government means to pay for its activities, which is taxing and the children of taxing, borrowing, and printing. This is a number so huge, it is difficult for the human mind to comprehend. But just to put it in some kind of a perspective, $1 million is a big number. $1 million is a large amount of cash. $1 billion is 1,000 million. And $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. These sound like numbers that we said when we were trying to exaggerate our point as kids. This is treacherous. This is perilous for the United States because this could end in national and global financial catastrophe. It is a system that is unsustainable. It's unethical. It's immoral that our government has, over the years, put us in this position. And not only us who are voters, but future generations, our children and grandchildren, without the chance to vote, without the ability to have a political voice, have been enslaved in advance to this debt. This cannot continue. This cannot be sustained. And the problem is, while both sides may blame each other, and while there is a constant call for bipartisanship, this is bipartisan debt. This is debt that has been accumulated by the reckless spending of both sides. Now, both sides want to maybe get rid of certain programs or have certain ideas about what the money should be spent on. We could all have a debate over what money should be spent on. And there's issues with the knowledge problem and the calculation problem of the opportunity cost of diverting the money in the first place from taxpayers to pay for what they think are the goods and services needed, and the bureaucracy and the incentives within that system. But not only that this system is bipartisan. This is agreed to by the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans, the liberals and the so-called conservatives, that what they are invariably committed to is continued reckless spending. This is spending more than the gross domestic product of the United States in a year. The United States, in spite of this, is still relatively prosperous among nations of the world. U.S. gross domestic product here, if you follow my mouse, is 21 trillion. But what that means is if you follow to over here, my mouse is highlighted. This is the percentage of debt to GDP ratio. The debt spent is now 105% of the GDP, the gross domestic product, what the United States produces in a year. We spend 105% of what is produced. In addition to this, if we break this down per citizen, this is including non-voters, children, and so on, everybody owes $68,000. Now, who's going to pay that? I mean, I didn't vote for this. You didn't vote for this. We didn't consent to this. We didn't accept this, except tacitly. We are all culpable, even though this may not be our fault or our desire. And $183,000 per taxpayer, not per citizen, per taxpayer. Imagine what you could do with the sum of $183,000 or $68,000. But that option would not, because of this debt, be available to you. You and your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren have been taxed in advance. And the biggest areas here, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, which these are bankrupt, and they will be totally bankrupt by the year 2035, according to the Social Security Administration, defense and war, and then interest on the debt. Eventually, the interest will be so high that it will be unpayable. We will no longer be able to pay the interest on our debt. The biblical wisdom is that the borrower is slave to the lender. America is, by its debt, becoming a subservient and slave nation because of its uncontrollable spending on military budgets, euphemized as defense, and entitlement programs that have been taken from and bankrupted, that are unsustainable in the long term. Eventually, this will not be able to continue. A chart that I wanted to show, it's not showing up clearly on here, demonstrates, and this is from the government, the Congressional Budget Office in 2019, easily looked up online, that the deficits, not only is this is not even the true number of the debt, the unfunded mandates, the unfunded liabilities, meaning what the US government has promised to pay in the future, but will not be able to because it won't have the money, things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those type of things in advance, far outweighs and inflates this number. And eventually, the interest on the debt and the deficit spending will be 144% of the GDP in 2046. All things being equal, continuing on as they are. And so this is a huge problem. This is your problem. This is my problem. And this is the bipartisan spending commitment of both parties that have created this problem that could quite literally be the end of America financially, nationally, and is headed toward financial collapse and global financial crisis. And in addition to this, our own society, you can look here and see consumer debt. This is now part of our culture. and this debt is unsustainable. We will not be able to continue to exist at the same level with this commitment to reckless spending. $22 trillion, rounding up to $23 trillion, which is right around the corner. And it continues to increase. This is a problem every American needs to be aware of. Every person ought to be able to say 22 trillion by heart and know exactly what it means, because this is the issue that could bring down the United States that no one is talking about.